Hey, everybody. You guys want to learn about how to go to Teams? It's easy, right? There are no more questions, so we're going to go home in about 5 minutes, all right? Hey, there's actually an overflow room, is there really? Anyway, so my name's BJ Whalen. I'm a program manager on the infrastructure team. I work on designing the infrastructure migration. My partner in crime here is Francois. I'll let him say a few words, and then he's going to kick off the presentation, and we'll kind of switch back and forth unless I can't talk.
Okay, hi, I'm Francois. I'm part of the Teams product group, helping build interop scenarios, migration scenarios with BJ. And today, in the honor of quite a few of you that I recognize that spent with me quite a few years working on Link, OCS, Link, and Skype, I'm wearing one of my old shirts from the Link conference 2014, I guess, something like that. Anyway, welcome to Teams. This is one of 4 sessions that are here to talk to you about the process, the technical aspects, the user dimension of going to Teams. The first one was yesterday, I think. Scott Stuberfield and Debbie presented that. There is one, I think tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, that pertains much more to the change management and user dimension of it. Then I have one on Friday at 11:30, shameless plug, that will talk about one specific case of what we'll discuss today, what BJ will discuss today, about meetings first. There's also a session that's done by our internal Microsoft deployment folks that I think was yesterday, or is it? No, it's tomorrow, I think. It's tomorrow. So what should you expect of today's session? Our goal is to make sure that you understand what it means to go to Teams, the end user experiences when you have both Skype, doesn't matter which type of Skype we're talking about, online, on-prem, hybrid, when you have both Skype and Teams in an organization. And most of the things we're going to discuss are actually valid for both on-prem and online. I will be talking a bit more about online, and BJ will talk about on-prem and hybrid in much more depth. We'll understand how you, as IT folks, can manage the experience of your users, the coexistence of SAP and Teams in your org, and what that results into, in particular interop and so on. And we'll explain and present Microsoft's recommendation for migration paths from a technical point of view, knowing that there is the full migration path that includes the change management, senior leadership governance, and so on, that was discussed by Debbie and Scott yesterday. We'll explain that migration path that we recommend for online and for the other types of customers. What we'd like to take away from this today is that we are ready from the point of view of tools to help you make that transition happen. Whether you would be coming from pure online or whether you have an on-prem or hybrid topology, you can make that happen. There is a path, and there is a clear recommendation from Microsoft. And you can actually customize that path to make sure that it fits your needs. You can go as fast or as stepwise and deliberately as you need or want. So we'll get started with talking about the pure Skype for Business Online orgs, and then BJ will take us through quite a few of the other things. We'll talk about something which is called the Teams-only experience. That's really what the experience is once you've been upgraded to Teams coming from Skype, okay? And then upgrade paths for more complex orgs. We can take questions as we go as long as they're pertinent to the exact topic we're discussing at that point in time. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time at the end. This, we debated whether to have this slide in here or not. It should be obvious to all of us. Why should you upgrade to Teams? Well, as a user of Teams now, have been upgraded, as somebody who's been going through this, I can tell you that Skype was one of my babies. I was one of the parents of Skype, been working 15 years in the org, love Skype. I wouldn't go back. The experience I have from a feature completeness point of view, and it's not necessarily one by one feature, it's at large, the experience around features is, in my view, strongly preferable. The experiences in terms of what I can get on my mobile device in particular, or on browsers and so on, is without comparison with Skype. And the operational performance in my experience is also something that I'm delighted with. I am finding that this is actually something that runs smoother, that delivers me a better experience, better quality, better reliability as far as I'm concerned. So that's why you should migrate to Teams, but of course your mileage may vary and you should examine that for yourself. This slide is the overall framework slide that we are sharing with the presentation that was done yesterday by Debbie and Scott, and by the one that will be done tomorrow around end-user experience migration or change management. There is only one way to think of it at Microsoft. What we're going to show you today is part of the setting of the project goal, project definition, the strategy, how you're going to determine how you go about the change. It's going to be the entire center portion. I probably have a pointer. Maybe I have a pointer. I don't see it. Well, I would be pointing at the technical readiness and user readiness portion of it. And really that technical readiness aspect is what we're going to delve much deeper into now. And then, of course, deployment and implementation, how you as IT folks can help your organization and your users go through this. Upgrade is a process that takes you from Skype to Teams. The objectives of that process for us, BJ and I, as we work on this, is to make sure that if you have Skype from Nest online users, they can move to Teams. If you have Skype from Nest on-prem users, they can move to Teams. Hybrid users, they can move to Teams. That as they move, users who have not moved yet and users who have been upgraded can work together so that there is interoperability between them. Some amount of interoperability, I want to be careful about that. There is some amount of interoperability between them so they can work together. And we want to make sure that the goal of you being able to manage this selectively at the user level and manage the experience of each and every one of those users, that's a very important goal, and that's a lot of what we've been working on. Okay? We're a little bit loose at times with the language upgrade, migration, all those things. It's getting to Teams, making sure that you live in Teams. Good so far? So what about upgrading for an organization that is a pure online organization? And by the way, the reason we are separating a little bit the pure online from the rest is that typically, and we have a very, very large number of tenants on Skype for Nest Online, and many, many of those are relatively simple. Some of them don't have an IT organization. Many of them would actually not be here. They're too small, and we want to make sure that those very simple organizations have actually an extremely straightforward path that is not necessarily the same that a complex organization like many of you in the room need. So that's why we're separating this a little bit in the discussion. However, the tools are the same. So if you feel like your organization resembles more one of the Skype Online organizations, that's okay. And if you feel as a Skype Online organization that you resemble more an on-prem organization from a complexity and type of challenges you're facing, that's okay too. Okay, so starting point. Your users are on Skype Online. So on Skype Online, the modalities that they can use, chat, meetings, they can organize their meetings on Skype. They can do telephony or calling, voice over IP or PSTN. Okay, we all know that. What Microsoft recommends, if you're one of those organizations, pure Skype Online, relatively simple organization, is that you use the full side-by-side approach to deploy Teams, which means that as a user, and I'm looking at this as a user, I go from having only Skype to having Skype and Teams on my desktop. And Teams is empowered to do as much and as many things as Teams can do. So Teams, in this case, you can see has chat, has meeting scheduling, has calling, has the ability to do Teams and channels, and there is the more, files, third-party applications, whatever it is, yeah? We want to make sure that those users, that specific user, has the richest possible experience of Teams that we can confer them. So we've enabled Teams with full functionality for that user. They get the full benefit, and they run both. Now, this is a very, very important element of this approach. It only works if you run both, and if actually everybody eventually runs both. The reason for that is they essentially operate like two separate and independent entities. Because you have chat on one and chat on the other, what this means is I can receive chats here, I can receive chat there. I can be called here, I can be called there. If I only monitor one of the clients, it won't work. If your organization has only 10, 20% of users doing this, it won't work, okay? From then on, as a user, at some point where the organization is ready, I will see Skype disappear. That's okay, because all of those other features, all of those capabilities, those UC capabilities, I've actually learned to do them on Teams. I've adopted them on Teams. And so when Skype goes away for me, that's fine. So what's my experience when Skype goes away for me? Let me see if I can switch this a little bit. This would be 7. Yeah, the resolution's a little bit crunched, so I apologize for that. So what you see is I have 2 clients here. I have my Skype client, which does exactly what it used to do yesterday. I'm in this intermediate thing in the middle, yeah? So I have the Skype client that does everything that it used to do yesterday, and I have this Teams client that does everything that Teams can do. And I have a choice. Every time I want to contact somebody, I have a choice. Every time they want to contact me, they have a choice. So I'd never know where it's going to land, so I need to look at both, okay? When I schedule meetings, I go to Outlook, and here as well I have a choice. I have 2 plugins. So this works well if your organization is one in which your users and yourself are comfortable with users having a choice. If you don't want users having a choice, you're uncomfortable, you think they're going to get confused, then we have other approaches, and BJ will talk about them. But that's, for simple organizations that can migrate quickly, that's the path that we would recommend Skype Oneness Online in particular. So let's look back at what this means for an organization at large. This is now the view from the IT admin's point of view. This is no more one user. This is the full set of your users. You start, everybody's on Skype Oneness Online, okay? Now what you do is you start deploying Teams to your users. You give them Teams in parallel with Skype Oneness Online. Now they have this patchwork of 2 colors. They have both clients. And what you want to do at this point in time is really work hard from an adoption point of view, the soft skills, the soft aspects, to make sure that everybody adopts Teams. This is all predicated on arriving at saturation of usage of Teams in your organization. Not 20%, not 30%, 80, whatever that is, 90. You want to arrive at that. And only then, it's very important, only then should you start upgrading those users. By that I mean upgrading, BJ will define, but also removing the Skype capability that they use on a daily basis today. So essentially going like this. Wow, BJ did those.
Those are cool animations, aren't they?
Yeah. Nice. So the important point here is to understand you must arrive at saturation. People must use both clients. If they don't, there's going to be some amount of confusion because I'm going to reach out to BJ. BJ, are you in Teams? No, he's not. Well, he's going to find it in his email box at some point later today. We lose some fluidity. So that's the type of things that would happen. As long as you can drive this type of saturation, this type of adoption, this is a very good path, okay? Oh, I did that. Sorry, I was out of order. You saw that earlier. So let's talk a little bit about what the experience is when you arrive at the end of that journey. When that first bubble shrinks and the other bubble grows, and you're only using Teams. BJ will describe in more technical terms what that means in a short while. But I want to tell you a little bit about what the experience is and show you a little bit of that as well. And I need to make sure I log back into that at some point. Yeah, good. That's the fun of doing demos on multiple machines while you talk at the same time. So Teams-only experience. There's 2 components to that. You used to have Skype. What happens to your Skype? Well, you still need Skype because you're still going to be invited to Skype meetings. Of course, some folks in your organization may not be upgraded yet. They may still do meetings in Skype. But there's a lot of other organizations that may not progress as fast as yours that may still do meetings in Skype, invite you, and so on. So you still need Skype or some sort of Skype client for the purpose of participating in Skype meetings. This is what you see on the left. So we use the term of upgraded user to characterize what more technically we also call Teams-only user, but essentially a user that may still have a Skype client, but that Skype client is only for participating in meetings that they've been invited to. That's all they would ever do in Skype, nothing else. Everything else they only ever do in Teams. Scheduling meetings, the UC functionalities, and of course all of the other functionalities. So chat and calling is all in Teams. They initiate and receive all of their chats and calls in Teams, whether it comes from somebody on Teams or whether it comes from somebody on Skype. So that means we need interop, and BJ will talk about that. Meetings, they schedule their meetings in Teams. They participate in whatever they're invited to. In order to get users to that state, of course, we need to migrate some data. BJ will talk a little bit more about that. May even show about a demo or something?
We might.
Ooh.
Maybe.
But there's data that needs to be migrated. You know, contacts, meetings, if you have your own Prime and you have meetings to be migrated, those type of things. So that's what happens here. So let me show you a little bit of that user experience, if I manage to, in Teams only. If the security software lets me do it. Okay, 6. So this is a different user. And you see that this user still has 2 clients. I used to have the Skype client on my desktop yesterday. Today I've been upgraded. I come, it's still there, but it comes into the special mode you see on the right. Okay? It tells me clearly that I've been upgraded. I've been migrated to Teams only. And helps me a little bit. It helps me find Teams if I don't know where it is. It actually does smarter things. It might have warned me in advance. It might have sent me notifications. It might have downloaded and installed the Teams client silently in the back as well before I knew it. So it helps me get set up. But that's what I see. And then, of course, in Teams, I'm seeing the full interface, whatever it is that I'm being given. So I'm going to see, activities. Of course, I already have activities here because I've been using it a little bit. It might be much emptier the first time you look at it. Chats, it may be empty or not, depending on whether you used it before or not. If you were in that side-by-side experience before, you will actually continue seeing what you had there. Okay? So that's your Teams experience, Teams-only experience. One of the things I want to mention is when you're in Teams only, as I mentioned, your chat will all come to Teams. If it comes from Teams, it will be what we call a native thread, which means that it has all the features and capabilities that Teams to Teams can do, and this is one of those. As you can see, there's GFs and all those things, wonderful. And if it comes from Skype, and you can see in some cases that might be the same user, you might have thread with the same user, native, and interrupt. This one's interrupt. And this interrupt thread is very clearly labeled as such. It lets you know this person is currently using Skype for Business. Other things you notice is all of the things such as how to attach a GIF and so on, they're not here because it's actually not as rich an experience when it's interrupt. Okay? So you can have those 2 threads, native and interrupt threads. It's kind of useful to know which one it is because, of course, if you have a native thread available, it's always going to be richer. Some cases you don't have a choice. So that's kind of, let me summarize what I did, and then I have a couple of questions for you for the transition to BJ. What we did is we talked about the recommended migration paths for simple organizations, in particular for pure Skype for Business online organizations, and that's deploying side-by-side with full capabilities, Teams and Skype. Saturating your organization, and then, once it's saturated, removing Skype, upgrading users. Okay? We showed a little bit of the expense of that side-by-side, and we talked about the expense of upgraded users, Teams only, both that Skype client that enables people to participate in meetings and the Teams client. Now, just out of curiosity, who's a pure Skype for Business online organization here? Okay, we do have, I would say, maybe 10%? Something like that? 15 is good at math. And who's on-prem in some way, shape, or form as server elements?
Who's on-prem with no hybrid, actually, right now?
And with hybrid? Okay, so yes. I would say 85%.
Okay, I'm going to trust you on that one. Oh, it's all me now.
It's all you.
Okay.
I'm done. No, it's not true. I have demos to do still.
Thank you. Oh, we got to
I'll come back for more.
We got to switch.
Yes, let me do that for you.
Yeah, I didn't get the memo on how to do this, so I'm gonna need your help.
So upgrade for more complex
Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit more complex orgs.
Click one click.
Click one click.
Yes.
One click. Okay, that's the slide. Upgrade from complex orgs. Do it. Okay. So let's see. One more question, actually, out of the audience. How many folks would say they have active usage of Teams, beyond, say, 25% of their user base? Okay, I'll let you count that one.
I say 8.5%.
Okay. And how many of you have anything other than a pilot that is in Teams-only mode?
3 people, 2, 1.
Okay, that's going to be point something percent. Okay. That is good to know. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about from a user perspective. So think back to what Francois showed you at the beginning when he took you through that user journey of how that user goes from Skype and Teams, and then go to Teams. We're going to take you through a slightly different path. Now, this path is almost done. There's still a little bit of work we got to do to make it really work for you. So I'm giving you a preview of what's going to come. But this is what we think will be the right way for on-prem organizations or hybrid organizations. And frankly, if your users have concerns about, hey, I can do the same thing in these 2 different apps, but they're totally different, and that causes me confusion, right? Depending on your user base, that's a concern for some people. So this would also be for you, even if you're online, right? But if your user base is like, nah, that's cool, don't worry about this, right? So you start out with Skype. That's what you have today. Then, here's the change. You add in Teams, but you add it without the UC functionality, okay? And so nothing has changed from a Skype perspective for this particular user. They're doing Skype as they've always done it, but they just now have some stuff that's brand new that they never had before. They have the Teams and channels. They can do the group collab stuff. They can do the file sharing. If there are apps that are plugged into Teams, they can go use that.
You want me to show that now?
Let me finish the slide, and then I'll give it to you. And then eventually what you do when you're ready is you shift them, and you basically take the UC functionality, you take it out of Skype, and you move it to Teams. So for this user, they never could do the same thing in more than one app. Okay, that's fundamentally what's different in this approach. Now, what you might be wondering is, well, what happens if a user on the right who is Teams only needs to talk to either of those other 2 users and they're in Skype, right? What happens here is that the routing is basically assured that if it's a Teams user, it's wherever it came from, it's going to Teams. If it's either of those other 2, if you have UC in Skype, whether it's the Skype with Teams Collab or the Skype only mode, the calls and chats are going to Skype. Doesn't matter where they came from. So the idea is that each user throughout this phase of the journey, they have one client where they know their calls and chats will always land, right? And then you make the judgment call of when to move them. Now, we hope you go real fast through this. We don't expect you to hang out forever in that middle state. We want to see you get to Teams only. But that's kind of the path. And I think at this point, sir.
Thank you very much.
Demo. We're going to show you a preview of what this middle state looks like.
7?
I don't know.
7. Yes. Okay, so it's me, I'm back. So this looks suspiciously like what we looked at before, but let's be a little bit more detailed. If you look at the left rail on the Teams client, so you still have the 2 clients, yeah? You still have your Skype that has not changed, it's exactly the way it used to be, and you have Teams. But the Teams client doesn't have a chat button, doesn't have a calling button. And actually, if I look into meetings,
let's do it. Is it going to work? Do you have the right build?
Something happened. So I won't look into meetings right now. My bad.
It did work, I swear. I saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my bad. It's not software's bad. If I look into meetings, I will not have the scheduling capability. So this gives me the ability to start doing Teams and channels. Maybe look at my files, OneDrive, those kind of things. Third-party applications. And have completely separated the UC capabilities, the ability to create meetings, the ability to do chat and calling in Skype. Please go ahead, sir.
Let's switch back to the slides.
Absolutely.
And are we back? We got the demo. Cool. So now let's go back to that same user, but flip to the org perspective. What does this organization look like? There are a couple variations. So in this example that I'm showing you here, this is an organization that just hasn't used any Teams yet, okay? So the simplest thing to do, and their entire user population is this blue bubble, right, of SFB. So the first thing you would do is you would basically assign them a policy which is going to give them the collab functionality, the Teams and channels functionality in Teams, but without the UC. And so now we got a little bit of that purple coming in, right? And you recognize the icons from before. So we haven't changed anything about how they do Skype and any of their UC, but they can start using channels, they can start exploring. Next thing you do is you create a Teams-only pilot, okay? This is over on the right side. The people here are Teams-only users, right? No matter who sends them a message or who gives them a call, whether it's from someone in the big circle on the left, whether it's someone from outside the organization, whatever, they're going to always get it in Teams, okay? And they'll have the full functionality of Teams. And similarly, when the people in the left send something to the people in the right, those guys, remember, are still using Skype for their UC functionality. So those guys are always going to get the call and the chat in Skype. But then what you're going to do is you're going to migrate them. And you're basically just going to shift your user population over, right? And so, ooh, look at the pulsing arrow. And I learned a lot about PowerPoint doing these things.
Long nights.
Yeah. So I didn't know you could do these things in PowerPoint 2 weeks ago. But you can. And then when you're done, you decommission all the other stuff as soon as you can. And you end up with everybody in Teams. Here's a different version where what I'm showing you now is one organization, but the two bubbles are different populations of users, okay? The upper bubble that's all blue is basically people who are only using Skype for Business, just like in the previous slide. But you've got some amount of people who are already using Teams. That's the lower bubble with the purple and blue interlaced together. So clearly, we don't want to take functionality away from those people who have started using Teams. That's a sure way to get on somebody's bad list or a lot of people's bad lists. So we're not going to do that. So what we are going to do is we're basically, for the people who are not using SFB, let me rephrase, for the people who are not yet using any Teams, so the upper blue circle, we will put them in the collab mode. So we're giving them the option to go start using Teams. They never used it before, so they don't know any better. We're leaving the people in the bottom circle exactly the same. They've already started doing both. Let them do both. Spin up your Teams-only pilot. Move them from either of the groups. Move them as fast as you can. You know, you might want to move the islands group first, but it doesn't really matter, right? Just get everybody over to Teams-only as soon as you can, and then you're done. So that's basically how you do it if you have people who are already starting in Teams. And again, we're not advocating that you take away functionality from someone who's already using Teams. That's not going to be a good idea. This is going to be an ad for his session on Friday. Here's the ad. So basically, this scenario is for organizations that are super excited. They want to go to Teams only, but it might take them a while, in particular because of some constraints around EV, right, or enterprise voice on-prem. And maybe either just they've got contracts that they're locked into for X number of years, they've got to amortize some old legacy equipment, and they just can't get the boss to agree to go now, even though they might even have the manpower. But they want to benefit from the rest of Teams, so what do? So I'm going to do this from a user perspective. Let's say you're starting out in Skype, and you could keep doing the path that we did before, add in Teams without the UC functionality, but here's where the change is. The next step, switch the meetings out of Skype and into Teams. And specifically what I mean is meeting scheduling. So your meeting scheduling is now in Teams. And remember what Francois said earlier, anybody can always join any meeting, right? So this is not about your ability to join meetings. A Teams-only user can always join a Skype meeting. A Skype guy can always join a Teams meeting, and we'll actually go into that in more depth. But in this stage, users here in the purple box, they're scheduling all their new meetings in Teams, but they're using Skype for Business for calling and chat. And then one day, we hope you get there. But if it's easier for you to start and hang out in that box for a while, go for it. And he's got a session on Friday that's going to tell you all about that one scenario. That's the end of the ad. You owe me a little bit for that.
Oh, yes.
We didn't negotiate the price.
Yeah. Tonight.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about interop. So let's start on the meeting side. I sort of explained this before, but let's actually explain it for real. To join a Skype meeting, you need a client that knows how to talk to the Skype service. To join a Teams meeting, you need a client that knows how to talk to the Teams service. So they're actually different clients. There isn't one client that talks to both. However, any user can join either, right? Because that client could be as simple as a web client. So if I'm, say, a Teams-only user and I just live in Teams and somebody in another organization invites me to a Skype for Business meeting, if I don't have the Skype client, I can just get the Skype web client. Actually, the chances are you probably still have it on your desktop. We can talk about that more if you want later. But the reverse is also true. If you're a Skype user and you've never used Teams before and somebody invites you to Teams, you can just get the client from the web, right? It's just a lightweight browser plugin, and now you can join the meeting. But they are different sets of code because they're different services underneath. So that's the meeting scenario. Let's now talk more about interop. And when we say interop, what we really mean is basically communication between, and specifically chat and calling between a user in SFB and a user in Teams. And just to set the stage for a little bit at a really basic level, like why is this needed, right? If you don't migrate it once, you're going to be for some amount of time in a situation within your org where you've got some users who are in SFB and some are in Teams and you want to communicate. So that would be an interop scenario. Let's say you get that over with, or let's say you just go instant somehow. Even after you are a Teams-only org, the need for interop continues. Because while you may be Johnny on the spot and you upgraded right away and you got the attaboy from your boss, those other companies out there, they're not as good as you, and they're still on Skype. And they may be sending you Skype meetings, and or communicating with you from Skype, and you got to be able to talk to them. So interop doesn't go away, not for, until all of Skype goes away. But as long as customers out there are using it, you need to interop. So that's why you do. Now, how does this actually work, right? At a really basic level, right? What we're talking about is you got a guy in a client, let's call it Teams, and Teams basically knows how to talk HTTP, and then you've got a guy or a woman in Skype, which is talking SIP, and somewhere up in the cloud, there's a gateway where all the magic happens, right? And it translates SIP to HTTP, right? And it just kind of works. But to make that work, we'll get there. There are some prerequisites to benefit from that magic, because although it's magic, it was created by human hands, so it is not perfect. Number one, you're going to find that to get interop and also federation, you're going to need to set up an SFB hybrid topology. And that's because interop and federation are only available when that SFB user who was originally on-prem gets moved into the cloud, right? And so you can think of this as every Teams user actually does have a shadow Skype account, and to get interop and federation, we need that Skype account in the cloud. And if you're on-prem, that Skype account's on-prem, and we can't give you interop. So we need you to move it into the cloud. You can still use Teams prior to doing that, but you just won't have interop or federation. So let's talk a little bit about what the interop experience is, and then Francois is going to do a demo. So basically, it's chat and calling, one-to-one, one SFB user, one Teams user, right? It's plain text at this point, right? And there is not the ability to add somebody else, right? And that's because fundamentally we are wrestling with two totally different protocols, right? And so this is a case where you're going to see some seams. So the way we work around it is we basically give you the ability, and we're planning to give you the ability, so that when you want to do one of these richer advanced operations like file sharing, or you want to add a person to the group chat, or you want to do screen sharing, you can do that. What we'll do is we'll automatically spin up a meeting and automatically invite the relevant people. And so I'm going to just turn it over to Francois, and he'll show it, because it's much easier shown than explained.
I will try and do that. Okay, so let's start with, this is 7. So I have 2 clients. I'm going to go a little bit back and forth between them. This is what you all know. This is a Skype user. We actually call it a Skype-only user, and we have some magic that BJ built to make sure it's well understood as such. But that's just a Skype user. The Skype user has not, in this case, let's say, doesn't even know that Teams exists. well, might know a little bit. So for example, if I look at their meetings, they're actually invited to some Teams meetings, and they're actually also creating Skype meetings, because the only thing they can create is Skype meetings. If they want to join the Teams meetings, by the way, it's easy. They can click on this, might spin the web client and so on. I'm not going to do that right now, but just so you know, you can actually just do it directly from inside the client, or you can also do it in Outlook. Here I have this other user, Inspector Fix. Inspector Fix happens to be, this guy here. Inspector Fix happens to be a Teams-only user, been upgraded, doesn't have Skype. So this guy can actually say, hello, and hello comes in, hello back, you know, it's a very important conversation they're having. And let me show you. Now, here's what the Skype-only user is seeing. The Skype-only user, Skype actually doesn't really know that Teams exists up front, because when we built Skype, you know, Teams didn't exist. But we're able to understand that the conversation is an interrupt conversation during the conversation. So you see at the bottom here, once the conversation started, we actually warned the user, hey, it's an interrupt conversation. And an interrupt conversation is now never going to be quite as good as a native conversation on either Skype or Teams. So we are giving them a little bit of a hint. It would be probably better if you had Teams, you had a choice, go to Teams. Otherwise, you can start a meeting, because meetings, as BJ was explaining, they have all the functionality. So if you really want to have the richest experience and you cannot have the same client, create a meeting in one or the other platform. You can also do calling, by the way. So if I want to, sorry, forgot. And on the other side, I'd mentioned that as well. This is the Teams-only user. This is an interrupt thread. So interrupt thread, very clearly shown as such. You have the little Skype logo on the side here. You have Skype logo here. You have mention here. And then, of course, there's changes, some things missing here in terms of GFEs and so on. Yeah? Now, either of those folks can start maybe a video conversation. Invites making its way through the gateway. Here it is. Both are muted. We should be good. Okay, so we have a video conversation. That's an interrupt video conversation. One client, the other client. Okay, so enough for the video, audio video. Which one am I showing? Let's switch over. So now let's say that Inspector Fix wants to show this absolutely gorgeous, beautiful PowerPoint that they did. It's almost as good as BJ's PowerPoint. So they do what they're used to doing, share a window. Okay, we're going to share this one, share this. Now here's what happens. We're actually creating a meeting in the back, and we're informing the user here that the meeting's being created. I receive on the other side a link, so it's kind of tough to switch back and forth. And I'm joining this meeting by clicking the link. So you didn't quite see that because I was struggling kind of going back and forth, but I actually clicked the link on the Teams side that was generated automatically on the Skype side. And now I'm on this side, I'm in a Skype meeting. That's a Skype meeting we created on the fly automatically on the Skype-only user side. The Teams user had to click the link, but once they click the link, they're in it. So it's not completely automated. It's some sort of facilitated escalation to a meeting. At least it works. You can share your desktop. We have it right now from Skype to Teams. We're working on the other scenarios. We also have from Skype to Teams the ability to go one-on-one to multi-party. So we create a Skype meeting for that, and we're working on other scenarios. We understand that's important to users when they're in an interrupt situation to have some sort of richness there. I want to continue to emphasize interrupts never as good as the real thing. So we suggest minimizing duration of interrupt, getting ready, maybe going into meetings first, getting ready, and then upgrading. But there is those elements of interrupt, and we're continuing to work on them. With this, I think it's back to you, BJ.
Okay. So, and then where's my little clicker? We did the demo. Okay, so let's talk about managing coexistence. So we've Francois has shown you a bunch of demos where you understand what the Teams-only experience is. You understand what side-by-side is. You understand what that Teams without UC functionality looks like. How do you manage all these? This is kind of a coexistence of different states. So we use the term mode to describe how you're going to manage that. And essentially, mode governs a couple of key things. It's going to control routing of the calls and chats, right? Where are we going to send a call and a chat for that person? It's going to also control what can you initiate, right? And in the fullness of time, that will be the same as the routing, right? If you can initiate an SFB if you can initiate calls and chats in Teams, then that's where they should land. I said that backwards. If the calls land in Teams, that's where you should initiate. If the calls land in Skype, that's where you should initiate. And then it also controls the meeting scheduling, right? And so the idea that we had was, hey, let's focus on the end user experience that you're trying to deliver so that people can fit in this interop world. And rather than giving you all of these building blocks and telling you, well, here's how the routing works, here's how the meeting schedule works, here's how the UI controls work, we said, let's find the common modes for how people can interop. Let's pick a fixed set, and then those are what you can use. It's a per-user assignment, right? You're going to use it in the O365 admin tools or the PowerShell. You can apply it to on-prem users. You're using the online versions of their identities, but you can apply modes to on-prem users with the exception of Teams only, and that's because a Teams only user must be online. You can mix and match, and I want to make sure I don't give the wrong message here. My intent is not to say, try every single mode out, and some guys in this, some guys in this. The point is, they will work together. If you want this one and you think you also need that one, any combination will work together. So don't worry about whether or not they're going to work. Pick what's right for you. So let's now go through the table, and these are the 5 main modes. And I'll go slow through this. I know there's a lot on the slide, and you can read it afterwards. But there are a couple of key points that I really want to hit here. So the left column is just telling you the name that we call it. The right side is kind of what we think it's recommended for. And then the middle 3 are basically the capabilities of that mode. And with the exception of islands, which is that side-by-side state where you can do either thing, if you start at the bottom from SFB only, what you notice is that as you go up, things increasingly shift from being an SFB to Teams. And by the time you get to the top, that top row, it's all Teams, right? And so the things we're talking about are calls and chat. What about your meeting scheduling? What about the Teams and channels functionality? That's fundamentally what it is. And so that top row, Teams only, this should be your end goal. Every single one of you in this room, in the fullness of time, you want your org to be Teams only. There may be reasons why you can't get there right away, okay, but that should be the end target. And to put it in perspective, eventually, actually in the near future, new tenants who never had a license from us, they will actually be provisioned with this mode, okay? So that's kind of the state of being a true Teams customer. Now, as Francois talked about at the beginning, if you're a pure online organization and you don't have any complex requirements, the recommended mode for you is just to stay in islands, right? That's actually what you get out of the box. You have the full functionality of Teams. You can experience the richness of what you get in Teams right out of the box, and you can go quickly, we hope, get to Teams only. If you're on-prem, or if you're hybrid, or if you know that your users are going to have a hard time with doing the same thing in more than one client, then we recommend you start with SFB with Teams Collab, right? And then from there, get to Teams only. And some of you, a subset may say, I want to actually do the meetings. That's okay. Maybe a subset need to do SFB only. We think that's more of a specialized case, but it's available. So we had a slide before. It said, hey, what's upgrade? We talked about it from a user experience perspective. Let's talk about what it actually means now. All it means is there's a policy that we assigned called Teams Upgrade Policy. It's got a mode called Teams Only. And that's all it is. When we upgrade a user, we assign that policy. Done. It's really simple. The question is, what happens and who consumes that policy? And so this is a partial list of the main things. But number 1, routing of all calls and chats for this user are going to be updated to go to Teams when you're in Teams only mode. And it doesn't matter where they came from. Number 2, the SFB client actually understands this and is actually going to restrict itself so it's in that meetings only mode. So in the demo that Francois showed you earlier, right, when you're a Teams-only user, you can still join an SFB meeting, right? That's actually the same SFB, or that's the same SFB client code, but because it has gotten this policy that says Teams-only, that's the only functionality it gives you. When you try to sign in and do regular things, it gives you the hand where it basically says, have a nice day, go to Teams. Let's see, what else? The meeting scheduling gets updated, so the add-ins are going to get swapped over. The Teams add-in is going to get enabled, the SFB add-in in Outlook is going to get disabled. We update presence, right? So now presence is going to follow Teams, and that'll be available to every SFB user. And you know, I was going to do a slide, and we didn't know where to fit it, and we ran out of time, but we're actually in the middle of, we're almost finished rolling out a DCR-related presence where we realized presence and mode really need to go together, because at the end of the day, the lesson we learned is that routing must follow presence. If presence says somebody is available, we darn well better be able to route to them. And we had some cases where that wasn't always true. And we have dug into that, and we understand that, and that is in the process of almost being, that's basically in all of TAP, it's just going to go worldwide in a couple weeks. But we basically realized that things even like presence need to be based on these modes. There's contact migration. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works on another slide here. But basically, when you first log on to Teams, contacts that you had in Skype for Business Online, you'll get them in Teams. The people card in Outlook, that now needs to be a Teams experience instead of a Skype experience. Things like the HID preferences, the HID controls, like on your audio device, the little volume thing that controls how loud it is, should that talk to Teams or talk to Skype, right? So that thing honors the policy. So what's the data that we actually migrate? There's two sets. There's contacts and there's meetings. So contacts are copied from SFB online in two phases, and I will get to the on-prem case in a minute. So even if you're not Teams only, the very first time somebody logs in to Teams, Teams will basically say, hey, are there any SFB contacts available in SFB online? If there are, let me go grab them and dump them into Teams. And now you've got them. Now keep in mind, it's a separate store. So if you keep using Teams and you make some new contacts, those contacts aren't in Skype. And conversely, if you go back to Skype and you make some more contacts, those are not in Teams. And that's why we add the second migration, which is whenever the time comes where your admin says, okay, mister, you are Teams only. Okay, I want you to only be in Teams. We do one final contact migration. And so what happens is that when that Teams only mode is set, Teams basically knows to do one last pull from SFB online, grab any new contacts, it does a merge, dumps them into Teams. What does this mean for somebody who's coming from on-prem? It means when they first log on to Teams, they are not going to have the contacts because it was looking in SFB online and they're not there. But when they are finally migrated over and they're Teams only, they will have them. And that's because the functionality to move someone from on-prem into the cloud already, since like Link 2013, knows how to take contacts from on-prem and dump it into SFB online. And then the rest of this code picks up and pulls them over. So that's the main difference there. But at the end of the day, the contacts will get there either way. Meetings. If you're upgrading from SFB online, the meetings are not migrated, right? You can still join a Skype for Business meeting. They're there, but any new meeting that you create is going to be a Teams meeting. If you're migrating from on-prem, we do migrate the meetings. And in fact, we have to, because if we didn't, they would not work, because the account identity has moved into the cloud. So for those of you who are familiar with the ability to move on to the cloud in the past, we had the meeting migration service. That will move meetings to them to SFBO. We are in the process of updating that so that if you do a direct move to Teams, we will move those meetings directly to Teams. I was hoping I'd be able to show that to you, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get that today. It's hot off the press. Yeah. But soon, it's coming. And so the idea is that when you move from on-prem to Teams, those meetings will end up being Teams meetings. So a couple considerations for on-prem orgs. We mentioned this before, but I really want to hit this hard because it's super, super important. And we found that some orgs don't realize it. You've got to enable hybrid to start moving to Teams only. You can certainly start enjoying Teams without hybrid. You've obviously got to have AAD Connect even to use Teams. But we found there are some orgs where they're not actually syncing all of their MSRTC SIP attributes, and that can cause challenges. You can get away with it while you're on-prem, but by the time you want to start moving somebody online, you got to get that cleaned up. Number two, you know, your users who are on-prem can use Teams, right? The key is that they're not going to have interop, they're not going to have federation, they can't be Teams only. And the only difference is that when you move them to Teams only, before you apply that very same policy that I mentioned before, Teams upgrade policy with mode equals Teams, you first move them to the cloud with move CS user. And now I'll just talk about what we call one-step versus two-step migration. With the code that we have literally right now, you would do a two-step migration where you would run move CS user, and then as soon as they're done, you would grant them the Teams upgrade policy with Teams only mode. And you can script that so it feels like one step, but it's two little PowerShell steps. We absolutely do not want customers to think of this as two different migrations. It's really one migration. You can go direct from on-prem to Teams. And you should plan it that way, you should test it that way, and to just hit it home, we've actually updated the code in the latest CU for 2015 and also in 2019, where we do all this for you in one switch, right? You basically, in move CS user, there's a new switch called move to Teams. If you specify that, it does what move CS user always did, but it also applies the policy, and once we're ready, it'll move the meetings to Teams for you. Let's see. I think I have a demo.
You have a demo.
Can we get me over here?
Absolutely. And while you look at this, just one point. While we talked about moving users online as part of moving to Teams, we would generally not recommend customers move from Skype from NS on-prem to Skype from NS online solely just for the purpose of going to Skype from NS online at this point in time anymore. If you're moving on to the cloud, we think you should move to Teams. And it's not something that we would encourage that you move to online in most generic cases to Skype from NS online just for that. Move to Teams if you move online.
Okay, so let's just take a look at this guy. And let's get his SIP address. Can you guys see this? Is it big enough? We'll get his hosting provider, and we'll get his Teams upgrade policy. Oh, he's not going to quite fit, but. Okay, so he doesn't have a Teams upgrade policy. He's UA0002. His hosting provider is SRV. That means he's on-prem. So now, what I'm going to do, move CS user, identity, UA0002. And then credential, I have a cred hanging around here. This is the admin cred. The target, this is going to be the same as before, sipfed.online.link.com. And here's the magic. The new switch moved to Teams.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to do it. No.
Is that one of those where red is bad?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. No, hang on. So that's actually a feature, by the way, and I actually mean that. So what happened is that the on-prem, and I'll show you this worked in a minute. The on-prem user, the way it sets up in automated topology, it gives everybody dial-in conferencing on-prem, and it gives them enterprise voice. And then what we do is when we move you to the cloud, we assume that you want them to have that same capability. And so if you don't have a license for the CPC in the cloud, or if you don't have a license for the EV in the cloud, we block you by default so that you don't end up in a misconfigured state, right? Now, theoretically, maybe you really just don't want it anymore, so we give you a buy and out, which is what I just took for a different reason, because I didn't configure it properly. But let's see if this actually worked. So let's bring up the old admin UI, and I should see it here. That was UA2, right? Yeah. We'll go to users. Yeah, I'm going to show you something better. But right here, that says, I actually don't know if I can zoom this because this is old UI. But that says he's online, and I'm going to show you he's online, okay? So I'm going to go to this other machine where I'm actually logged on as him. If you look here, it's UA2. So let's just see what happens. Let's fire up Link or Skype. He's thinking.
There should be some drum roll.
And boom, I got the Teams only, right? So, and I was hoping I could show you the meetings in Teams, but I can't yet. Okay, what do we have left for slides?
Planning migration, I think. Clickers here, slides are on.
How much time? How are we doing on time?
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, I mean plenty.
Okay.
Not that much, but.
Okay, so let's talk a little about planning your migration and these things we call upgrade tracks. We actually have two different tracks, whatever you want to call them, for upgrading. There's what we call the IT admin-driven track, which is frankly what we assume all of you in this room are going to be doing and what all of this has been about describing. But there's also something called a Microsoft-driven automated upgrade, where Microsoft can do the upgrade for you. And the main thing I want to do is just give you a brief overview of what that is so that you're not surprised by it later, right? The idea is that that's intended for smaller organizations that don't have dedicated IT admins that don't know how to do the move. You guys are here, so you're not really the target audience. But I don't want you to be surprised by it. I want you to know what it is. The key difference between a Microsoft-driven automated upgrade and an admin-driven upgrade that you do yourself is simply how the migration is initiated and who initiates it. Underneath, everything's the same, right? The user experience of what they see with the Teams-only dialogue that I just showed you, the core mechanics of how you do an upgrade, it's all the same. So in the IT-driven track, right, target customers are going to be, your larger online orgs, anybody who's on-prem or hybrid. The admin is in control, initiates it through the various tool sets. Anybody can do it. And you pick the pace that works for you, and if you need to go back for whatever reason, you can do that. In the Microsoft-driven automated upgrades, right, this is intended for customers with very limited IT resources, right? And that's, at least for now, that's exclusively for pure online organizations, right? So that's really the target audience. And what Microsoft will do is we'll actually automatically upgrade that tenant. Now, there are a couple steps to this. Number one, we got to provide some advance notice, like, congratulations, we're going to upgrade you. It's going to be wonderful, and we're doing it tomorrow. Just kidding. No, it'll, we give you, typically it's about 30 to 60 days. I think they're experimenting with different windows, but that's kind of the window they're looking at. And they give lots of reminders, and they send it out through the message center. They'll post it on the admin portal homepage, and they'll send an email to whatever tenant admin email we have on record. And by the way, the admin can actually defer once if they want when they get this. And the other thing is that, if you are subject to it, you can also start doing it yourself if you want to get a head start and say, hey, no, I want to be in control. I'll just do this. You can use all those tools that we just described and do it. The other thing is that, we have a lot of analytics underneath where we determine who is actually eligible for this automatic upgrade, right? Because what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade the entire tenant at once. So we have to do a lot of analytics based on what's the feature usage of this tenant, and is that actually ready, right? And so right now we're starting very, very small, and as we get more experience with that, we'll broaden that out. But again, it's intended for folks with limited IT resources. And so the main thing is I just want you to be aware of it. It's out there. I would not expect folks in this room would be the target of it. This is just a quick table that summarizes the two. I think we are actually at time. Well, we have more slides. I think we'll take a break.
Yeah,
we'll take questions.
Good time for questions.
We'll take questions. Depending on the appetite, we can actually go a lot deeper. We cut a bunch of slides. So we'll just open it up for questions and see what the audience has appetite for. Why don't you please come up to the mic, because that way everybody can hear, and I think
there's
recording.
An overflow room and people online.
So I'm coming from a pure Skype for Business online. How do we handle recurring meetings.
Do you handle what, sorry?
Recurring meetings.
Recurring
Recurring
meetings.
meetings.
That we set, like, for example, for the whole year, right? Is it going to be something that will get migrated as well, or?
So those would stay in Skype for Business. What you could do, typically, not always, and as you said, not always, but typically they expire after X occurrences or after X date.
Yeah.
And then you could just change it over. If they don't ever expire, I mean, you could always just delete it and recreate it if you want to, or you could keep running it in Skype if you really want to.
So that means we have to advise our users to recreate those meetings.
If you want them in Teams, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So my question was, with multi-tenancy, is there a way to do a migration to multi-tenant hybrid?
I don't know what you mean, multi-tenant.
From a single on-prem that supports multi-tenancy, so we have tons of customers, and we want to go to hybrid to them.
Oh. That's
like
a hosting.
are you like a
is that
hosting
the-
provider?
Is that,
Yeah,
is that
service
the multi-tenant pack, whatever we used to call it?
Yeah,
Right.
we have not invested in that in
Yes.
At all?
years.
We would
and
need to take that aside.
We're
and
not
chat,
looking at
but,
that.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Is this scenario that you've outlined, or the different scenarios,
Speak
the
up.
different scenarios you've outlined, are they likely to change, or is this how it's going to be? Because I know Teams hasn't been around for long. Is this kind of a stopgap until we get something better? Is it worth waiting? And I know you guys want everyone to move to Teams, and I get that, but because it would seem to me not a particularly difficult thing to achieve if we could get the Teams client to actually natively talk to Skype for Business.
That's the
The code is all there, right?
So I can stop you there. No, that's not going to happen. This is it. This is it. We might improve here and there, have a couple more interrupt scenarios and so on, but do not expect that Teams is going to become a Skype client or Skype is going to become a Teams client. That is not going to happen. And the fundamental principles you've seen here are the ones good to go going forward.
Okay, okay.
I hear you, but yeah, thank you.
So for interop, we need to be in hybrid mode. Is there a minimum?
Say again, for what to be in hybrid?
Interop,
Yes,
we need to be in the hybrid mode.
yes.
Is there a minimum on-prem server requirement? Like, can we
At the bare minimum, you need 2013.
For interrupt?
Yeah, for interop. If you've got EV, you really want 2015. But if you don't have EV, 2013 will do it.
Okay, thank you.
And from a client point of view, the interrupt scenario, escalation scenarios have shown they're only in the more recent clients.
Yeah, and I was answering your question from a server perspective, which I. Yep.
Hello?
Yeah, another interrupt
Oh,
question.
Oh,
so let's get, sorry.
rotate.
Sorry.
What a concept.
Okay, so two questions. Did you say that recurring meetings, if you're online only, they aren't going to migrate over?
Yes, and actually it's not specific to recurring meetings. It's if you are moving from SFBO to Teams, those SFBO meetings, whether they are recurring or not, are not migrated.
That's not for just on-prem.
That's for if you're online.
Specifically
Oh, wow.
online.
Okay.
If you're on-prem, everything gets migrated.
Okay, so then my real question was, we switched and rolled out MFA, and when we rolled out MFA, because we're online, completely online, but we have the client installed locally. When we launched Skype, it required that 16-digit passcode, but when I launched Teams, it didn't. Is there a reason for that? Or will it?
I don't think it's something we can answer on the spot. I'm sorry.
I don't.
No.
It doesn't. The reason sounds like it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Why it is that way, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't think we can answer on the spot.
That's probably an auth issue in the Teams client.
It's
Okay.
probably something you need to go prosecute with support, sorry.
All right.
By the way, people who ask questions, please speak up, because on this stage, we can barely hear you.
All right, just a quick question. Is there any way to trigger the contact import manually after your automatic?
I don't know. It is not hard to do. It's something that's been talked about. I just don't know if it's exposed publicly. It's an API. In theory, it's doable. You're not the first person to ask. I have not gotten an official answer on what we're doing there.
So I
At
should
this
just ask
point
my
in time, the
tab?
answer would be
Yeah,
no.
at this point, answer is no, but that could reasonably change.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe center this time.
Yeah, an interop. So interop requires hybrid mode. But the user can be on-prem or has to be in the cloud.
On-prem,
The user can.
the
be.
Skype- the
Now, will that
sorry,
be in?
let's-
So
Be careful.
there's subtleties.
Yeah.
So there's subtleties. If you're the Skype user, you can be on-prem. Okay. If you're Teams user, you must be an upgraded user. You must be a Teams-only user. If you're
Well, you need to be online.
you need to be online.
You don't actually need to be up.
Yeah, you need to be online.
The Teams user must be homed in SFB Online. If you have an SFB on-prem account, you cannot use Teams to talk to another SFB account. If you have an SFB online account, even if you don't use it and you don't care about it, but underneath there's an SFB online account, you can use Teams to talk to any SFB person, whether they're online, on-prem, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Hybrid, well,
Oh, okay, so our current scenario is we are on-prem and we're in hybrid mode, but all users are homed on-prem.
So they would not have interop when they use Teams.
yeah. And
So-
they're probably in what we call islands mode that BJ described, and they have to use Skype for federation. They have to use Skype to talk to other Skype users. They cannot use Teams.
Okay.
And we can take this
For federation.
further. For federation, yeah.
They can
for
use Teams
for-
just without federation.
Yeah. Yes, they can use Teams for Teams. Yeah. Okay, we can take that aside as well if you want for more.
Okay, just one other quick one. In terms of the migration of contacts,
Yep.
if you're running both Skype and Teams and you're migrated, your existing Teams contacts remain as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You want to go? I don't forget where we're
I
going.
think right this time? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry, go to the microphone. No, sorry, sorry, we can't hear you.
I don't even know what you're
Come
saying.
to the microphone, please.
So we have Skype for Business Online for all of our users. We have a subset of users that are in a call center, so we limit what their capability is. If we migrate all users but call center agents to Teams, is there a reason in the near future that we're not going to be able to keep our call center agents on Skype? Is there any end of life scheduled?
Oh, and those Skype users are on-prem?
No, they're online.
Online. No, we have not made any announcements of any end of life or anything like this. Clearly, we'd love to see people who are Skype for Business Online move to Teams as much as possible, but there has been no announcement of any end of life.
Is there a way, if we wanted to move the call center to Teams, it looked like you demonstrated some where we could limit some functionality, or remove some functionalities. Is that a long-term strategy? Like if we wanted to take meetings out, like we want our call center agents to only be able to chat. We don't want them to be able to call because they're taking inbound calls. We really just want them to chat.
So you'd be able to manage that. That's
Okay.
part of the things that are actually coming in Q4
Okay.
that will enable you to manage discretely what applications, functionalities they see.
Okay, so you could do that by department or by teams.
By user, by whatever you want.
Okay, thank you.
For the scenario where you're in islands with Skype for Business Online and Teams and you're using them side by side, what happens with incoming PSTN calls?
It depends on how your voice is hooked up.
Let's say it's the Microsoft Cloud PBX or phone system.
So it's a Microsoft calling system.
Calling plans, yeah?
Calling plan.
That's right.
That's the one I forget, actually. I think
I-
Nikolai here. I think that goes to Skype by default.
So we're not the experts of this, but my recollection is that it would land, in this case, in Skype.
Yeah. For example, if you were using direct routing, that would definitely go to Teams,
Okay.
right? But with a calling plan,
My recollection
It
is
is
Skype.
Skype.
But to be verified, we're not necessarily the experts of this. Nikolai is the
If
right
Nikolai's
person
here-
to talk to.
jump up.
No, okay.
Thank you.
So we're still at Link 2013. We're going
Close up.
to this. We're still Link 2013 on-prem. We're going to the phone system like he just described, but we are Office 365 and we've been using Teams pretty extensively. I noticed that you said it was Skype 2015 CU8. Is there any CU necessary or available for the scenario you described for Link 2013?
There is not any CU planned. If it's something you really want, I would work with your appropriate support person to create demand for it. But the reality is you don't actually need it because you can just do it in those 2 steps that I outlined.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's just it makes it a little bit easier.
Okay, and then follow-up question, the contacts, we didn't really train people to use the link contacts, probably because the functionality wasn't there like it is for the 2015. So everyone's got all their stuff in Outlook contacts. Is there any way, oh God.
Sorry, I'll say that with a smile, but no.
No PowerShell I can run or anything like
There
that?
actually, so there was discussion of somebody, you know, it might be possible to create a PowerShell script or something, but I don't know of anything that's productized.
At this point, there's no solution.
So I'll just haunt the boards, okay.
Hey guys, just a quick question. Polycom, Interop, Skype, online, hybrid, and Teams.
So this is a little bit a different scope from what we've discussed today.
Okay.
What I would acknowledge is in order to migrate your users, upgrade them to Teams, it's important to understand their dependencies, and in particular, if they create meetings that do require, that have conference rooms invited and so on, it's important that those conference rooms will be able to join Teams meetings. So for example, through Cloud Video Interop.
Correct.
There's a presentation that I think Shri did on
Yeah.
Cloud Video Interop. I would refer you to her because she's the one who can tell you about that. We wouldn't be the most accurate.
It'll still work though, or?
Again, I would refer you to that presentation. I'm not sure I know the specifics of that.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks. Are we left now?
I think we're back here.
So, quick question. I just wanted to get absolute clarity for a particular scenario. So, if I have an on-prem Skype for Business user, and I want to migrate enterprise voice, I want to migrate them to Teams. Let's say I set up direct routing for Teams. So, and I migrate the account from Skype for Business on-prem to Teams. There will be interoperability between the on-prem Skype for Business users and that Teams user.
Yes.
Correct.
Now, one thing you didn't say, but I think you assumed in there, was that when you set up not just direct routing, but you set up SFB hybrid, right?
Yes.
Those are different things. And
SFB
Yep.
hybrid is set up.
Yep.
We
As long as you do that, move them
migrate that
online.
user from on-prem to Teams.
Yep.
There will still be interop between
Correct.
Teams and okay.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're a little old school. We still have receptionists in a lot of our offices. Most of them are still running the 2010 call attendant for Link on our Skype environment.
I was still working I was already there.
Yep, we actually have, probably half of our offices have some sort of receptionist and a main line that they want a human being to pick up. Is there any implementation for Teams for some sort of functionality like that where the person's basically going to be transferring calls?
So let me comment on that. First, this is really not something neither I are really specialist stuff. I would refer you mostly to Paul Cannon, and he did a session on voice features. I can tell you that we are thinking of things like this. But you could also start with carving out those users and maintaining them on Skype and using Interop for connection with the others if that worked. Oh. So it doesn't necessarily prevent starting some amount of migration, but the capabilities of call queue and auto attendant in Teams are significantly superior to what we used to have before. They might also come to help there. But in terms of do we have, what are the approaches for switchboard operators? You should speak with Paul Cannon.
Paul, okay, thank you.
Hi. We're SFB hybrid and then in islands mode with Teams. We turned it on a long time ago and it's still in preview. I would like to take away meetings from people who have Skype for Business and only have them in Teams, but not have to remove any Teams functionality from them.
This is the easiest answer. Friday, 11:30.
Okay.
More questions?
Yeah, so we're half on-prem, half online. The half on-prem uses enterprise voice. It sounds to me from everything we heard today that if we want to continue to use our normal PSTN routing, everything, put in direct routing first and then move them.
That's a really good question. There's a bunch of slides in the end that I did not go through, but they're in the appendix. They should be there.
Okay.
And they show you the order, basically. And there's 4 permutations. One is basically, let's say you're a simple SFB online org, no voice. Next, you're SFB online, but you have some sort of voice. What do you do? Then you're on-prem, but no voice. What do you do? Then you're on-prem, but you have voice. What do you do? And it basically kind of shows you the deltas. And so, yes, there's going to be a, we call it like a one-time global config where you got to go basically pair your SBC with our PSTN edge, get some routing configuration set up. But then as part of the upgrade, when you pick, okay, this user I want to migrate, you update their SBC at the same time. And the high-level flow is in that appendix. And then Nikolai's got to talk on direct routing where he's got all the details. But in terms of how to integrate it with the move from on-prem to online, those slides are what you want.
Okay, thanks.
So we are over time, so we have to stop the speaker, headset and all those kind of things. But we're going to stick around, come down and take questions on a personal basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.